Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear listeners, today we have a really important topic for you. The importance of safeguarding and child protection is something that, as a community and as parents, we really need to understand and get on top of. So today on the Our Girlington Podcast, you have a host, Molna Sajid, myself, Babar Rahim, and Brother Shamsuddin. Brother Shamsuddin is from an organization called EPUK. Brother, could you just explain what that organization is, what it does, and your role in it?
Dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. EPUK actually stands for Education Partnership UK. It's an organization with its own website, so if people Google it, you will see more details. It's an organization that actually specializes in training and education development right across the board, both from vocational training all the way to academic training qualifications through recognized institutions within the UK. And it actually delivers those things, both the academic side and the vocational training in three international bases: Malaysia, UAE, and Turkey at the moment. So it's got an international sort of reach to it as well. So training and development is the main focus really.
And what's your role in the organization?
Okay, we have a number of people that do various different things, and again, all the details are identified in on the website against different people. So myself, I'm responsible for all the matters relating to safeguarding and child protection issue that our organization receives inquiries about. So that's in terms of advice, not in individual cases, but to do with organizational infrastructure development, scrutiny, evaluation, and all the rest of it. And actually delivering the actual safeguarding training itself. So I do that myself. I actually deliver the training both at practitioner level and also at higher level for people who are responsible for looking after, God forbid, if any incidents of safeguarding was to happen within a particular organization. So you've got the normal staff who have general training, but when I say general, that's a bit of an unfair word because it's actually a full day long syllabus that people have to go through, and when those staff then subsequently come across any potential issues, they then take to another person within the organization, usually known as the designated safeguarding lead, named person, child protection officer, whatever the title people use. So that person then organizes the what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, who needs to be informed. So those are the two sets of training that I do. Over and above, I actually do policy development work and also safeguarding evaluations and audit, just to see where things are within an organization, if there are gaps, how and what can be done to address those gaps.
So, Molna Sahib, you're on mute.
MashaAllah, Shamsuddin Bhai, first of all, Jazakallah for joining our podcast today. It's nice to see you, and MashaAllah, you're a man of many talents. And, MashaAllah, the audience today is listening, and also they want to know what is safeguarding and what is child protection. I think before we even go and tackle these kind of issues, I think it's very important because a lot of our parents do hear these words and sometimes they become afraid of these words. So if you can explain what is safeguarding and what is child protection.
Okay. That's a really good question, Marina, because sometimes when we talk about safeguarding, we actually mean child protection. And when we're talking about child protection, we actually mean safeguarding. And it's really important to get that right. So safeguarding generally focuses around what we do in an organization in terms of setting up its structure so that we have a safe organization from the viewpoint of child protection work. So, for example, does it have policies and procedures in place? Are there people regularly trained? When was the last time people were trained? What sort of topics are they exposed to as part of the training, so that they're aware of you know the kind of things that they need to be looking out for when it comes to safeguarding issues, child protection issues, child protection itself. So that's it's what I've just answered to you in the last couple of seconds is a big chunk of a 5-6 hour long training just on that particular topic. What is safeguarding? Child protection, on the other hand, is what steps we take individually as practitioners, people who are responsible for a particular group of young people within our organization. That could be, recreational facilities, after school provisions, in a school classroom. It doesn't have to be faith, just in a school, college, university classroom. If a member of staff was confronted with a potential issue of safeguarding, what actually going to do about it? What are they actually doing? So that's what child protection is, as opposed to safeguarding. So, another way of summarizing it, safeguarding is more to do with the infrastructure stroke environment of a particular given organization. Child protection is more to do what is it that you and I do on a practical level as people in charge of a particular group of young people, whether it's in an education setting or a recreational setting. Does that make
So,
sense?
mashallah, you spoke masjid, madaris, and religious organizations in your work.
The safeguarding training that I deliver has actually I have actually delivered this into faith institutions. That's right across the board. I've been to Christian faith organizations, Hindu faith organizations, Sikh faith organizations, Jewish faith organizations, and I've also been in Muslim faith organizations. So I've been right across the board, and just because it's a faith entity, the issues around safeguarding and child protection does not change whatsoever. The responsibilities remain exactly the same. What we need to do remains exactly the same. Just because a particular body comes under one of those headings doesn't change anything.
So, mashallah. So, when it comes to the actual, we've talked about the definition, and we've talked about like the definition of safeguarding. We've taken the definition of child pregnant. What are some of the practical things we could do to actually implement this?
That's a really good question, Brother Weapon. The first thing we need to recognize is that it is an important issue, and that we need to be catered out with the right knowledge, information, training, and development to actually understand, what it is. And only then, once we understand, we can actually do something about it. In terms of what we do, is the kind of thing. I mean, you know, let me give you a blunt example. If you've got anything to do with an organization that has dealings with children, and I'm only talking about children because there are also safeguarding issues around vulnerable adults, but that's not an area that I deal with. I'm just focusing on children. Okay. So if you are part of an organization that has anything to do with children, either in terms of recreation or in terms of education, you are by law required to have child protection training. Okay. If you don't, and God forbid if anything happens, there will be an investigation, and the idea is not to frighten anybody. You will have heard the names changed now. Once upon a time, we used to hear on news serious case reviews that used to happen. Classic case, Peter, baby P, yeah, baby Hamza in
Yes,
Bradford.
yes.
Yeah.
So when something happens, an investigation will take place, but it happens in serious cases, hence the phrase serious case review. It will, and that's one of the things that I said to colleagues when I actually delivered the training, that God forbid, if anything goes wrong in terms of safeguarding within a setting, a case review will get to the bottom of it. Because what we need to recognize is, let's say, for example, you've got child X at your organization, and you might say, well, I'm purely taking the after school supplementary setting here, but it could easily be one of the state schools, secondary, primary school, whatever. Okay. God forbid, if anything happens, serious happens to a child, death or serious harm, a serious case review will be initiated. And what that serious case review will do is it will touch every different entities where this child is likely to come into contact with. So, for example, the education establishment itself, whether it's the high school or the primary school or the maktab or the homework club or the youth club that the child goes to. Okay, it will talk to you will find out whether or not social services are involved. It will talk to health professionals, GP, health visitors, people in the hospital. So all those entities who feed into the well-being of a child generally, they will all be approached as to what level of interaction they had, what level of involvement they had, on what basis they engage themselves. And it will find out when they engage themselves, did they do it in line with law? Did they take all the reasonable steps to find out if there are any issues in the background? If they had any suspicions, did they take the reasonable steps to bring this out, i.e., go to other bodies? So, for example, if the school became aware of something that, a class teacher, for example, became aware of something not really adding up, they will then go to the designated person that we talked about earlier on. That person will then start ringing bells at different organizations, starting with children's services, stroke social services. Okay, so a serious case review will actually go into finding out who's had anything to do with that child and have they taken the right step. If they haven't, and as I said earlier on, the idea is not to frighten anybody. It will find out where is it. All of these entities put together is like a chain. Is and sometimes I use the word tasbih, but some people might find it slightly insensitive. But it is that chain of carers, people who are responsible for that child's well-being, that come together to provide a holistic service. And if that chain breaks, a serious case review will find who's done it, who's responsible, and what needs to be done. So to go back to your question, what can we do? We need to train ourselves. It's just simply not a good enough excuse to say we didn't know what the laws were. It simply is not going to go down well. Let's just leave it at that. Playing ignorance is simply not a defense. So I admire people who are doing. There are thousands up and down the country who are
Sure,
taking this.
like you mentioned, the safeguarding, and I remember many years ago here at Masjid Umar when we started off the madrasa maktab system here. One of the first things we did look into was the safeguarding policies, and as we started to implement them, I remember we went to the courses and just to educate our own selves. You realize how important of our entity, the Masjid Madrasa, and a role that they play in a child's life. And every parent that drops off their child drops it off with trust, uh, knowing that this
Quite.
madrasa will be taking care of my child. So, like you mentioned, the case of baby Hamza, and you realize that, mashallah, so many times you can intervene and help people that are struggling there or having some kind of difficulties, and especially as a masjid madrasa, sometimes people have that relationship with them that they can go to them and talk, and alhamdulillah, because since we've implemented these things, like you said, mashallah, you can intervene, you can help. First, even ourselves, we were scared. Oh no, I think we do have this fear around it that, oh no, we're going to get in trouble, our children will be taken away, and social services and all this sphere, but you realize that, God forbid, when a case does happen, that I could have done something or I could have stopped it, and then you have that guilty conscience that I should have intervened when I knew about it. Do you understand? So, and I think every institute and every madrasa, every religious organization, and anybody that dealing with children have to take safeguarding very seriously.
You've touched on something so fundamental, Marana, because you see, the worst case scenario, if safeguarding goes wrong and not appropriate action stroke steps are not taken, the worst thing that happens is child dies. And we've seen examples of those. Go into just Google serious case reviews, and they will tell you, you will see lists of sadly hundreds of cases where things have gone wrong. Okay. And as he rightly pointed out, it's not just that I don't want it under my watch, but more importantly, it is the fact that I failed when I could have intervened, take some action, and I could have saved a child being damaged for the rest of their life. That's what the reality is here. Because when a child is subject to abuse, there are different types of abuse. Okay, um, when they come to, we're talking about educational settings, so I'll focus on that. But recreation settings are exactly the same. That may well actually be the only safe space that they have, because they're actually being abused, within the sort of relatives network. Because one of the things about this horrible subject is that abuse doesn't happen from total strangers. It usually happens from people who are known to that child, either through direct family relationship or through family relations with somebody who's very close to the family. So it's very rare that a total stranger will actually be instigating something like this. I get it that today we have social media and things happen online and whatnot. That's a different issue altogether. But generally, when a child is being abused by somebody, it's actually somebody who's known to the child. Majority.
And Brother Shamsuddin, like you said, and like when you do these case studies and when you hear about incidents, then you realize sometimes that child is not safe in that home. It's a sad thing to say, with those parents. They might be Muslim, but like you said, if he's being violently abused at home on a daily occasion for whatever reason, it might be safer for that child to be in the care of some other people rather than those parents, because unfortunately the only thing he's receiving at home is abuse. Sometimes, like I said, we brush under the carpet thinking it's our Muslim community, but reality is that child might be better away from those parents, which is a sad thing to say. But like you said, when you go into these case studies and when you hear about incidents or you deal with incidents, then you're thinking, whoa, really, this child doesn't deserve this. And I think that leads to the Every Child Matter program. And I was thinking about this Every Child Matters, and I was thinking, mashallah, alhamdulillah, our deen 1400 years ago, our Prophet ﷺ taught us every child matters, every woman matters, every man matters, every neighbor matters, every Muslim matters, every non-Muslim matters, every tree, every piece of ground. Everything has a right and a responsibility. And our Prophet ﷺ emphasized the love for children. He emphasized the rights of children. Sometimes we always talk a lot about the rights of parents. Mashallah, the rights of parents are so high that we can never fulfill the rights of our parents, but we try. But just like there's the right of parents, there are rights of children, which Islam has given. It can start from giving a child a good name, then giving them good ta'aleem, good education, giving them good tarbiyat, good habits, good Islamic values you instill inside them. So this is the responsibility of the parents, getting them married, looking after, safeguarding their iman. So there's a lot of responsibilities. It's easy to bring a child into the world, but then to safeguard and look after this child as a Muslim, our duty is to safeguard his iman, his Islam, his identity, his values, bring him up in a proper manner. So there's a lot of things, and like we said, unfortunately, we ourselves are switched off from this, and we think, wow, I'm learning something new. No, you're not. This is our Prophet ﷺ taught us this 1400 years ago, and our Prophet ﷺ would embrace the children when they would come to the masjid, and he would pass his hand over the head of children, and he would show love and affection towards them. And mashallah, there's many narrations and hadith, and the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was a very friendly place for everybody to come to, and so it was a child community.
You've touched on something really, really amazing, Varada, because I've been doing this for 5 years. It's going to come to 6 years, summer this year. I have not come across anything in safeguarding that has not been laid down so beautifully 1400 years ago. Nothing to this day. And where I've had reason to cross-reference, I've gone to people, who have the knowledge, and these are, very, I don't want to name anybody here now, but these are names that we are proud of within the community, not just within Bradford, within Yorkshire, but throughout the country that I've cross-referenced. Okay, so you're absolutely right. There is nothing in safeguarding that's actually not in our deen. And then one of this example that I sometimes use in my sessions is the story of the little Sahabi Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu. As a child, he was in the services of Prophet ﷺ for 10 years. As a child, we cannot take a child in for a couple of hours a day, and we kind of lose our marble because they're really testing us and whatever else. Okay, his own testimony, Malana, is people like you that tell us from the mimbar on a Friday. His own testimony that in the 10 that he served Prophet ﷺ, not one day Prophet ﷺ used the tone of reprimand to address him. What does that say? What does that say about nurturing our children? Is it one of the things that we often forget is that we talk about children and young people and we miss something fundamental. I've not read it anywhere. This is from personal and life experience, and that is, sure, they're young people and children today, but they're actually the adults of tomorrow. So what exactly are we? Which is why when I do my training, because it's predominantly 99.9% of my people who come on my training are teachers and governing body members. Okay, to the teachers in particular, one of the things that I always say, and I've that endorsed by many very learned people, that as a teacher, the words you speak, the tone you use, the body gesture that you use, the facial expression that you use, the finger gesture that you use, every single action, every single word that you speak to interact with the child is leaving an impression on the hearts and minds of that child. And either it will develop to be something that you will be proud of in the future, or it will be something that you will be not so proud of in the future. And so therefore, as teachers, you're in the most fantastic place to actually shape lives, and not many professions actually offer that, to actually make humans for the future. Okay, and this is just the way it goes. This is just the way it goes.
So Shamsuddin, in your experience, that and the cases that you've probably dealt with, as laymen, as parents in our society, we know that organizations have a duty, but what about in our homes? How like I just referenced a bit from our deen, Islam teaches that our children have rights. How can we safeguard our children with our own homes? So that it doesn't go further, those things don't escalate, and that can get us in trouble, or you know, um, you know, that's not nice to say. So what can we do within our own homes to make our house a pleasant home where we enjoy the company of our children, the children enjoy the company of their parents, and we make a rose like we always hear from our elders. And when you go out in the path of Allah Ta'ala, when you learn about it, and we say that we need to make our house a garden of paradise, and so that we like to go home. And so how can we do that?
Um, by Babar, a learned person is always a learned person. Beautiful stuff coming out from one another. What a fantastic prompt. Let me break down something, Marana. Again, this is not a theory. I've not read it anywhere. This is just my personal experience. Okay. If I have a child that's going to a school, okay, maximum 6.5 hours a day over 5 day period, out of the 168 hours during the week, 5 times to about 25, 30. Let's add in the other 2 hours, roughly on average 2 hours from the supplementary provisions. So that's the end of the 10 hours. All in all, we are actually looking at less than 40 hours worth of involvement with education providers. I'm just looking at education for now. Rest of the time, the child is actually at home in the company of, their parents, their carers, siblings, and people around them. I don't for a moment believe miracles do happen. I don't for a moment believe that with 6 hours worth of engagement with a child for a fairly limited period of time, when you look at the lifespan of education, from the age of primary stuff, yeah, it's sort of building up. If you take it from secondary school, university, blah, 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 it's not really that much. And then for me to actually expect that my child's going to come out at the other end of the conveyor belt as Einstein, I think I'm actually fooling myself, and I would address myself in that. What I think is important is that we, parents, carers, the family of that child in question, we need to lay the foundation. And that's what I think, if I understand it correctly, Manora, that's what you're alluding to. We have to lay the foundation. Where does ambition come from? Where do aspirations come from? The child's not going to pick it up from social media and TV. It's got to come from seeing people within their circle. Oh, my cousin's done this. My uncle's done this. My aunt has done this. My younger brother, my older brother's done this, so I want to follow their footsteps. So it really has to start from home. So when that happens, what do you actually get? You get a confident child being developed. And when a child is confident, you can actually have mature conversations with them in terms of protecting themselves. Because the truth is, we live in a horrible world, and bad things do happen. There are bad people out there, irrespective of how they dress, whether they dress like you and me, or whether they dress in service personnel uniform. It doesn't matter. There are bad people out there, and I've seen all of those people in my previous work, Marana. So in terms of what we can do, we need to create that environment where the child actually takes pride in growing up in a particular environment, which is exactly what I was referring to earlier on. That if the atmosphere, the environment within the home is not supporting the well-being and the development of that child, both physical and mental, the 6 hours in the school and the 2 hours that a faith institution, I'm just using an example, Maktab Madrasa has them, that's probably the only safe time that they actually have away from what they would regard as hell of a place. So it becomes imperative that we work to try and bring about atmosphere and environment within the home that makes that child feel safer. You know what? There are social and economic challenges that we have to overcome. There's poverty there. Bradford is one of the, in terms of different areas of deprivation. Bradford is one of the top. It's not a category where you want to be top, but we are. But equally, there aren't that many towns who were also not in a similar way. Against that, there are households and families within my own neighborhood, and I'm sure Babur will find them, Marina, you will find them, where people have gone through the challenges, having grown up in inner city households. Mashallah, they have gone on to become doctors, accountants, lawyers, surgeons. They've done that. So what that shows is that challenges are there, but we can actually overcome those challenges. Feeling sorry for ourselves, complaining about the fact that, oh, I haven't had enough opportunities. I'm really sorry, but I haven't got time. I don't for a moment disregard presence of challenges, but the idea that nobody gave me a chance. No, the truth of life is nobody does give you a chance. You have to go and grab a chance, but in a dignified, following its etiquette in a respectable way. You grab the chance. I hope that
Mashallah.
makes sense.
Mashallah. So, well, I wanted to ask a quick question about safeguarding. So, and I wanted to be a bit of a devil's advocate here around it. So, what do you say to them people who say that back in the day we never had safeguarding and everything was okay? So why isn't it just a money making thing where we have to fill forms and pay people to come do reviews, and it's all just an excuse to break up families? What would you say to the people who put comments like that forward?
Right. Okay. For people who think that it's an agenda to break up families, haven't seen what I used to see day in day out when I was working in the child protection team within the local authority, and that's the team that deals with when a child gets taken away from the family. I never used that phrase, but there were colleagues in that team that used to use the phrase that by the time a file lands on our desk, they would say that's when usually the S has hit the fan. I'm not elaborating on the full phrase here, because by now a child's actually been taken away. Okay, safeguarding is not a joke, because try and imagine the pain, and this was one of my live cases. Try and imagine the pain of a mother who's carried a child for 9 months, 10 months, whatever the time period is. Okay, at the age of 4 months, that child gets taken away from the family because something happened in the family and the family failed to protect the child. That was the case. By the time I joined the team, and it ended up in the family court in Leeds, the child had already been away from the. This is a 4-month-old child that had been taken away. By the time I joined the team and went into in that was one of my cases. The child had already been away from the family for 8 months. Try and ask that mother what that pain feels like, to have carried that child for 10 months, to have loved and nurtured it and fed it and cleaned it and held it and kissed it for 4 months, then to have an unfortunate situation where the child got taken away, and by the time I became involved, it was 8 months in the care of foster care. I might add, the mother had nothing to do with it, none whatsoever. Now try and explain that to that mother when you say safeguarding is a joke, safeguarding is a bureaucratic agenda, safeguarding is a money-making machine. Go and talk to that mother.
Shamsuddin, I don't know if you're allowed to.
Sorry, Maulana, but I don't know if that sounded a bit emotional, but that's the reality.
That's very powerful, alhamdulillah. It's very powerful, and I think and this is just again my opinion, is people who generally have them types of views, and I was just being a devil advocate obviously, but people who have them types of view are people who haven't experienced what you've experienced, and they haven't seen what you've seen, and they live in this rosy kind of world where alhamdulillah, may Allah make this the case for many, like everyone, that their childhood's been safe and the environment's been safe, so they can spout stuff like that. But it was something that I wanted to, like, I have heard it, people saying like, "Oh, this never used to happen a long time ago." So I thought I'd put it to the expert on the panel and see from and your response was a very powerful response.
I'm certainly not an expert, but I have a lot of experience of dealing with this. Mona, sorry, I haven't
Subhanallah.
forgot. I'm gonna come back to you. Let me give you another incident. Okay, I'm getting ready to come. I've done my nearly 37 hours for the week, as you usually do in public sector. Generally, not always. Okay, I'm getting ready to come home Friday afternoon. I'm looking forward to the weekend. A set of paper lands on my desk, and having read the summary of the paperwork, where a girl has gone and complained, or rather shared with a member of staff. This is where it takes us right back to the whole topic where we started. Why should we train ourselves and become competent in dealing with these kind of issues? When a 15-year-old girl goes to a member of staff and makes the following teacher aware, it's called disclosure, makes the following disclosure that this is a 15-year-old girl, that at night time my father comes into my room, and I'm not going to say any more to you. I
Astaghfirullah.
came home that day with a lump in my throat walking down St. Unity Square. That what kind of a world are we living in? What kind of a society? Now, if that particular institution did not have the training and development and the structural resources, training and all those kind of things, how would they deal with this? How would they help this particular child? This is a 15-year-old child whose life is almost being destroyed. Hopefully, there's a chance to pick it up. So,
Inshallah.
I the truth is, Brother Robert, I actually get that myself. When I turn up to do training. Oh, brother, once upon a time we never had those kind of things, and what is all this about? And all I can say is relay to them what I have physically with my own hand. I have touched the paperwork of cases, and that's all I can do. Beyond that, I would say burying our head in the sand is not going to make us walk very far.
Mm.
Sorry, Mona,
No,
you were going to
Masad, you
say
can ask.
something, and then
no, I was just saying, Shamsuddin, but
yeah,
you
carry on.
mentioned baby Hamza times. I don't know
Mhm.
if you're allowed to obviously mention it on here or not, but I think just to let the listeners and the watchers know what was the case around baby Hamza, where was the neglect, or okay, if you can't go into that particular case, but what generally is the neglect?
The I certainly didn't have any involvement as such, but from the media report and my own experience and everything else, I can give you a picture of what was actually. Well, the most important thing is I don't know if people have read this article and will remember the fact baby Hamza was discovered dead, lying in his cot in his room, having been dead for 3 years. Exactly. The baby had been dead for 3 years. The question is, how
Inna
on earth
lillahi
did
wa
such a
inna
thing
ilaihi
happen?
raji'un.
And this is where, remember, we were going back to, we were talking about a serious case review. That's where the whole exercise there is to find out who had anything to do with that family, who had anything to do with that child, what were they doing, when were they doing, who was doing it, what were they doing that they actually missed all that. And the
The
case
neglect in
review.
the different places.
Sorry, Manasa.
I said, like you said, it's the neglect in the different, whoever had contact with them, whoever
Yeah.
was around with them, and you know, a child, a baby, is a jan, it's a life, that Allah's given, and some people that if they were aware, they knew about it, and they've kept quiet, or whatever it may be, or people that could have intervened, they didn't intervene. It's all who and what now, and they can't do anything. And like Shamsuddin, you just, and the reason why we're just giving these examples, I think, is people got to know why safeguarding is very important. And I think that's what I'm just trying to get out. Like you just mentioned about the girl with the father, unfortunately, and I just remember a few months ago, and I don't want to go into it, but a woman did relate a similar incident, and about her own family member. Do you understand? And I was like, the first, and I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. Do you understand? And
Mhm.
so I took the relevant advice that I needed to from the professionals. But like you said, until you don't see and you're in the position that you see it day in, day out, or you hear about these things, you deal with these cases day in, day out. It's all about how can people intervene, how can people, if they know something, tell the relevant bodies that this is happening, so you can, like you said, save a life or save a person from neglect, from abuse, from emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. And that is a responsibility. The hadith comes to mind that whenever you see some kind of evil, you should stop it with your hand, if you can't with your tongue, and if you can't, at least feel bad in your heart. And sometimes, when abuse is taking place in our own houses, unfortunately, we have to stand up. And sometimes we see it's unjust abuse, that takes place, um, and we just brush it under the carpet or pretend we haven't seen it. And unfortunately, like you said, when something goes wrong, then we think, I could have done something, I should have
Mhm.
done something, and
The,
it's too late.
the thing is, uh, when it comes to safeguarding issues, brushing it under the carpet is not going to make the problem go away. It's actually going to make it worse. So let me give you an example. Okay, if a child is injured in the house, and I'm going to say in the house because if it's in the youth club, in the homework club, in the maktab, in the school, I know all these places they have training and procedures in place. So I'm very confident the situation I'm trying to describe will not happen. But in the home, it's more likely that it could potentially. I'm not saying all homes are like that. Okay, if a child is injured, don't delay in getting medical help. It may be that the child suffered horrible injury. It may be that, and you're scared. Don't hold back. Because you know what? There's that phrase in English called honesty is the best policy. Explain to them what happened. Because you know what? Those people who take care of us at the A&E and the doctor, they have a very, very advanced level of safeguarding training, believe you me. Okay. And they will get to the bottom of it. Those doctors and nurses, they will get to the bottom of. If you're saying a child fell down the staircase 2 steps, they will be able to, if it was 2 steps or if it was 20 steps, they will be able to tell if the child fell accidentally or somebody was having a tantrum and took it out on the child. All these things will come out. Okay, so if God forbid, a child is involved in a domestic accident, don't delay, go in. Because guess what? If you delay it, it's one of the acts of abuse, it's called neglect. You have failed to take care to promote the safety and well-being of that child, i.e., in this case, provide medical care. Child can't go there. They're dependent on us. A child can't do that. We as adults, that's what we have to do. So the failure to do that is one of the four major categories of abuse, which is neglect. And you know what? They'll get to the bottom of it. And if it turns out that it's quite severe, you know what? Worst case scenario, you might be deprived of the company of that child. Not here to frighten anybody, but this is the reality that we have to bear in mind. Okay. You know, Gee, Brother Babu, go ahead.
I was just gonna mention. Sorry to cut you there. I was gonna mention. So we've talked about institutions such as school and madrasa and other youth clubs, and we've also talked about the home. What about as a community? So like, if you as a community member, you kind of see something, you're not quite sure, but it looks like that child isn't something isn't right over there. What's the sort of protocols? What sort of stuff can we do to try safeguarding our community? Because I remember back to, and we keep going to the good old days, but I remember back when we were young, like you knew everybody, right? So my father knew everyone in the community, so I could walk up to any elder and I could have a chat with any elder. Now it's a different world we live in. So what about a scenario like that? What's all the best steps?
Yeah, okay. Really good point. There's something when it comes to the world of safeguarding and child protection. There's a phrase called child protection is everyone's business, and it literally means that. Okay, the difference is out there, you're Joe Blog, ordinary member of public. You're just doing minding your business, and you see something that seems really really questionable. There may well be limitation in terms of what you can do, but you should try to do something about it. Okay, so it just depends on whether you inform the police, whether you inform the social services. If you find, for example, a child within a particular education institution, generally kids will have uniform on, and you might be able to identify from the uniform because you've just driven past the locality and you see 300 other kids wearing the same uniform, so it's that school, blah 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 down the road. You can easily make a phone call to the school and say, look, I've seen one of your pupil, and explain the circumstances, and that's all you can do, to be fair. You're a member of public, you're just passing by. Yeah, if you chose to, you didn't have to do anything. But like you said, is that something you want to read about on the TNA and live with it for the rest of your life? Could I have done something about this? So, say when it comes to child protection, it is everyone's business. Everybody has a role to play, and those are very clearly laid out and defined within sort of roles within the organization. But out there in the community, I mean, one of the idea that's actually finding quite a lot of favor within policymakers higher up the education Department for Education is training up, for example, hairdressers in safeguarding training. And you can see the reason behind that, because of their close proximity and contact with people. They'll actually get to see things. Kids have haircut. They go to saloons and hairdressers and whatnot. Now, you and I both know that they the proximity between the client and the professional is very close. So they will see things. They can, and it's a case of they have the training and they're able to blow the whistle, so to speak. So that's there are limitations in terms of out there in the community, but that brilliant saying, where there is a will, there is a way. If you see something is not right, you can't, because by the grace of Allah, we live in a setup where there are structures in place, and we can't turn to somebody for help. Unlike some parts of the world where things happen that there are no structures in place. Here there are structures in place, and we can make good use of them.
Shamsuddin,
go on, sir.
I was just going to say, sometimes it's not even abuse towards the children in sense of hitting or sexual abuse. I remember a few years ago, and obviously can't name names. A very bright child in our madrasa, top of the class, everything. All of a sudden, his sabak was very poor, and he was constantly crying. And so Ustad, he brought him to me and he said, Ustad, look, it's been 2-3 days, and his sabak has been poor, and it's not like him, and he's constantly crying. So then, then I did my own little investigation as a child protection officer, and I did ask Ustad, did you see anything, or did you see anything? And so anyway, after that, what happened was, when I did ring the mother, she mentioned that they themselves were having a domestic issue at home, and the impact of that was on the child that emotionally he was broken. um, and that affected his school because I was linked with the school and I was governors of one of the schools. They also were dealing with that particular case. So then, like I said to you, and not only after talking to the mother, and then because I knew the family, I talked to the father, whatever. But unfortunately, things didn't work out between themselves, and it ended up in divorce. But do you understand? It's very important to recognize uh, what's happening to a child. Otherwise, we as teachers sometimes, oh, Nalik, you're constantly crying and you don't know your sabak, and we don't know the impact of other things upon that child. So, I'll be like, obviously, when you go into training, abuse are of different nature, but it's very, very important to get your training done, especially if you're looking after children. But also, like I said, once you have that connection with them, and when you do investigate, and you get surprised that wow, a child can just be uh, at the receiving end of something else between a mother and a father, and the impact that it's having on the child. And if you're not aware of it, you can end up just damaging the child more by telling him off for not knowing his subject or disciplining him, and you haven't realized that what he's going through. So it's more than just teaching somebody subject nowadays, Alibata. It's especially in this today's society, and it's hard and it's tough, and that's why you just make dua, Allah make khair for everybody. uh, and remember, that's why Allah mentioned in the Quran that children amal are fitna. They test and the trials. Do you understand? You will be tested. If Allah bless you with children, not everything's going to be straightforward and you're going to say this and it's going to happen. You have to expect children might turn against, children might just respond, or they might have had impact from society outside, and they saw just something else, or they're thinking is something else. So it's very important that we befriend them at home, we talk to them, we sit with them, we listen to them. And sometimes zid versus zid, me being stubborn against him being stubborn doesn't work. One was have to give in,
You,
and sometimes he has to give in, or sometimes I have to give in, because that's the world we live
you
in.
touched,
And
Marcel, you've touched on something yet again so fundamental. I wanted to touch on it earlier on, when we talk about the home environment and all the rest of it, but I left it at that time. But I knew I wanted to bring it up at some point. But you've just gone ahead. The reality is, family breakups will happen. It's a horrible world we live in. It's no point pretending that it's not going to happen. After we finish this program, from this point onward, it's going to happen. The worst victims of family breakup, i.e., the relationship breakdown between a husband and wife, the worst victims of that relationship breakdown are the children. They bear the brunt of everything that goes on, and you just relay a brilliant example of an otherwise what clearly sounds like a brilliant child, just completely went for a nosedive. By the grace of Allah, he was in the care of people who knew what to do and how to intervene. Because you just said it, Molana. This child was really at the deep end, and they just needed somebody to lend them that ear, that shoulder. That's what they needed. And if you don't know how to deal with that point in time, as a member of staff of that organization, recreational education, doesn't matter, you probably missed the chance. You probably pushed that child away. And you know what? That's why I always say teaching is such a rewarding job, because I said it in the beginning. This is one profession we are actually blessed to make the future of our society, not just community, the future of our society. But not having the right approach, the right personality, the right style of intervention, whilst we mean well, we could actually undermine what we actually set out to do. But that brings me to another point, Monana, which I feel I want to touch, and that is in most of our organizations, and I say this in my training, most of the time I get brownie points, or sometimes I wind up people the wrong way, but I'm going to say it as it is. Most of the time, our ustads that come into this organization to give those 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is during the week, it's usually, and especially worse for those who are full timers, imam, and then they're also having to do that. It's probably the third job of the day that they've come to at 5 o'clock to do 2 hours and then go home, because they've actually started 6 o'clock in the morning. Job one, midday started another job after Zuhr Namaz, another part-time job, and they're coming to your. I'm just going to use your organization as an example, Marana. Please don't get me wrong. I just want to illustrate the point. Well, if you've got a member of staff who's actually had two previous jobs in the same day and is now coming to the third job, what level of energy, what level of commitment, what level of passion, what level of compassion do you expect from that individual? And I think, and I'll tell you where the fault lies. That's in my view. This is not. I've researched something that if I was to, I'm pretty sure I'll be vindicated. That's because we as a community have failed our organizations. We as a community have failed the institutions of our community. Because had we had proper structure in place which values people's training, development, and experience and offers them a decent salary to start with, they don't have to be doing three different jobs in one day and then come the third job 2 hours in your place. So we as a community also need to take responsibility as to what level, we talk about, wanting to, make our children's future better. Well, how are we going to do it? I went to one place down south, and one person said, "Brother, we try to engage with parents, but they never come to us. They never attend meetings, this, that, whatnot." So I said, "Give me one example. Give me an example where you try to engage with them, and they did not cooperate. Give me an example." "Oh, we wanted to renovate the." We went, send our facility, and we were trying to fundraise. Nobody wanted to know. I just stood there completely bamboozled, thinking, what an approach. I said, the problem here is that all you're doing, these are parents who are also having to pay. Whatever the amount is, the bottom line is they're having to pay. And then also make every Friday chanda, whatever they give according to their means. Okay. And now you're having a third attempt to try and get something extra from them. People are actually fed up. Had you turned it the other way around, which is that you want to provide good education. Good education requires good environment and good resources. Good environment and good resources need investment. Investment means we need to find the funding to be able to create that environment which will make our place safe, secure, and stimulating for our children to learn, and they will prosper. Had you taken that approach as opposed to going out with the bowl, the chances are you would have got something out of it. And they accepted that it does make sense. So we haven't even got the art of connecting with the people who want to do better for their children, but we're not actually giving them the structure that we have that would actually show that we can help together. Because remember, this is a joint enterprise between the home and the organization. We can help to bring about a prosperous life for this youngster, but it's going to require commitment from both sides, not just the one side. Which is why, I specifically wanted to target us as the community, because we have failed you and your institution, Molana, because we're not investing in it as a community. We're not investing it as parents and carers, and yet we expect you to deliver goods on the back of what? The third job of the day. I think we're kidding ourselves, and we're trying to burn you up.
Brother, I
Sorry
just
for
want to
the rant,
come.
but I just
No,
wanted
no.
to.
It was a valuable insight, subhanAllah, on where some of the failings of the community are, and where, alhamdulillah, some of the engagement problems are, and alhamdulillah, inshallah, we can pick up on it and we can improve. I just want to go to some of the comments. So there's a couple of comments showing some real love for the podcast. Subhanallah, your comments are really appreciated. There's a comment here saying that talking about how sensitive the topic is, and that it's really good that we brought it up, and that's what we try doing on the podcast, bringing up topics which are sensitive and relevant. And alhamdulillah, having guests on who are, even though he doesn't like me calling him an experts in the topic from my perspective. Subhanallah. And 100%, our youngsters do need to be educated from an Islamic perspective. And alhamdulillah, inshallah, the Mullah Sahal put a little bit of an Islamic touch on this. Brother Kessel, he's from the local masjid that's around the corner from the Mustafa Center, and he's talking again about we as madrasas see children for a long time. So, and that's a good example that fits into where Mullah Sahib was talking about, where he saw a child which was really good and then saw him drop off, so they can see that. And he goes on to say that we need to train our staff, which is a common theme, and we've talked about that, and we obviously 100% agree. A sister here talks about the behavior and sign that something isn't right. Most children, well, they're not always naughty. And we should be able to spot that, and that's a very good point there. The children are not always just naughty.
It's a cry for help. That's a fantastic point from Sister Saida.
And also, it should be compulsory for all teachers at the mosque, and I'd say beyond the mosque. All, like you said right at the start, anyone who has any interaction with children should have training, regardless if that's masjid, recreational clubs, and obviously we know that schools do go through that, but any recreational, any contact with children, they should have the safeguarding training. And then, and I'm sure Mullah Sahib will echo this as well. So, brother, guess who's from the Al Mustafa Center says that as part of the induction for the teachers in the last 7 years, they've made it compulsory to put safeguarding in there, and I believe that's also a requirement at Masjid Umar as well. So I believe we're going in the right direction when it comes to safeguarding in the madrasas and the maktab. It's just we need to make more progress and more progress. We can't sit on our roll, say we've done the training, we're all good now. It's more than that, isn't it?
Definitely. And the other thing is we have to recognize that doing the training one-off is not enough. We've got to go back again and again, because requirements are changing, regulations are changing, procedures are changing. So we've got to be mindful of those things, and our organizational policy and procedure have to reflect those changes and the way we operate as members of staff of this organization, and even board members. Board members who come into regular contact with children as part of their board member duties should by law really be trained, because they're coming into contact with the children fairly regularly. They may not be teaching, I get that, but because of their role in the organization, they happen to be there more often than not. When children are there, well, guess what? They're trained. That's what the law says. Train, retrain. Sorry, that's the message.
No, I was going to say that, and I'm going to come to a message inshallah in a second. So I was just going to say we've hit the 1 hour mark, and that's our time allocation. We don't want to take too much of your time as well, brother. So I'd like to ask you, so if you had any closing comments for our audience, what would your closing message be to our audience about safeguarding and child protection?
Okay. First and foremost, our children deserve better than what we're offering them today. And the truth is, we can actually give them better. It's not always about resource implication. It's not always about more money and more funding. There is something called in English working smarter rather than working harder. I can tell you, not just through my training, but just having grown up in our community, by the grace of Allah, no other community works harder than our community. When I say our, I'm being slightly biased. I'm saying that the Muslim community, in terms of time, energy, and commitment, nobody works harder. The question is, why are we still lagging behind? We're working hard. Why are we still lagging behind? There's got to be one answer to that. We're not working smart. Once we start working smart, things will get us. So working smart means we actually work with the organization. The organization works with us. We want our children to do better. Our organizations want their children to do better, their students to do better. Well, we've actually got a common purpose here. So why are we struggling? The reason why we're struggling is because we're not engaging. We're not sitting on a level playing field, you know. And once those differences are overcome, I think things will happen. We have resources beyond anybody's expectation in terms of time and commitment. Funding aside, Brother Baba, that's a material fact. Okay, but the most important asset we have in our community is the desire for our people to want to do better, the desire for our organizations to want to do better for for our communities. There is a disconnect in terms of how we're coming together to do that. And that can only come through regular discussions, making mashwara. You know, we want to do this. How do we move forward? That's the only way it's going to happen. We've got to find ways of working smarter because hard work, we've already got the medal. Nobody can take that from us. I've seen it. I see it day in, day out. Nobody can take that from us. Let's start working smart.
MashaAllah. Yeah. Maulana Saab, a comment from you.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah first of all to Shamsuddin Bhai for taking out his time. All I like to say is that as a parent, as a ustad, as a teacher, as an imam, the children are our amanat, a blessing and a gift from Allah Ta'ala. And at the end of the day, we have to give our accountability to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Just like sometimes when we get in bothered and we have to give our account to the relative bodies, ultimately we have to give our account to Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala has given us a child. Allah Ta'ala made them a test and trial for us. And they're going to be challenging at times. But we should learn how our Prophet ﷺ, you know, what our deen teaches us, how we show love and affection towards our children, and how we listen to them as well. You know, sometimes our children may be in bother and they just want somebody to listen to. So we need to befriend them. We need to be their best friend, especially during these challenging times. And the thing is, they're the gift that Allah has given to us, and Allah will ask us, what did you do? The hadith, kullukum ra'im wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. Every shepherd will be asked about his flock of sheep. So every responsible person will be asked about his responsibilities. So as a parent, we'll be asked about our children. As an imam, we'll be asked about our muqtadis. As a teacher, we'll be asked about our students. So, you know, it's a big responsibility with a lot of burden on the shoulders. So it's not easy, but the rewards for carrying this burden is Jannat. It's Allah's pleasure at the end of the day. So what we need to do is remember, children are challenging, they are tough, they're tough for everybody, for teachers at school, for teachers in the madrasa, for parents at home. But same times we need to learn to befriend them, learn to sometimes not always just about teaching them through books. It's just about sitting and enjoying each other's company, just talking, just playing as well, just going out for a while. That's learning. So we've got to do all these things, and we've got to make sure that we look after our next generation because they're the leaders of tomorrow. May Allah Ta'ala safeguard our children, safeguard our masajid, our madaris, and all our locality from all kind of harm. That's all I've got to say.
Jazakallah, Maulana Saab. So I'd like to add to the Maulana Saab saying thank you for your time, brother. I think it's been a real insight about bringing this topic to life with them examples and with some of the stuff he said. So I'd like to extend that as well. Finally, just on some closing things, donations. As you can see, scrolling across the bottom, it's been scrolling there for a while. National Bank, United National Bank is the bank account of the masjid. We're building that masjid so we can get more youth involved, we can get activities, we can get a safe place for people. So the sort code, account number, use that to do some direct transfers. There's a GoFundMe page in there as well. If you search for Masjid-Umar-Build on GoFundMe, you'll see that. And then there's cash if you want to do the good old-fashioned way. If you use that number, Brothers Zulfikar will work out a way. And final comment which popped up, which I think is really cool, so I'm going to just pop that up on screen. Sister says the best gift a parent can give their child is their time. Subhanallah, what or beautiful ending quote there. Thank you for that. So on that note, thank you for all. Thank you to all our audience, our listeners, our viewers for commenting and getting involved. Inshallah, there's something to take away from it from you, and definitely was for me. And inshallah, 7 o'clock. Oh, sorry, Mullah Sahab. Next week, who do we have on next week? I almost forgot.
I thought you've forgotten. And I know you're still upset after Everton beating Liverpool, but you know. You don't need to.
Wow! Where did that come from, Mullah Sahab? What the?
I had to get that one in.
You see, brother, this is what I got to deal with every single week. I got to deal with this.
Shamsuddin is part of emotional abuse.
When we won the league, Mullah Sahab was hiding in a cave. He didn't come up then. Last season, where were these comments? Last season, Mullah Sahab.
One-off comment, you'll get away with it, but if it becomes persistent, then you're probably walking on eggshells. I'd be careful.
MashaAllah, there's just a bit of laugh that we are between ourselves. Alhamdulillah, next week we've got, again, a very important topic, especially in our society, the impact of suicide in our community. And again, we might think that suicide doesn't happen, but it happens. But what leads a person to taking their own life? So we've got Ilyas Karmani and Sharing Voices. They'll be here, inshallah, joining us next week, 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock. So inshallah, please join in and tune in. And I know we don't go further on, but as it's the month of Rajab, and on the night in the month of Rajab, the Prophet took the night journey to Masjid Al-Aqsa and up into the heavens. So inshallah, in March, the first two programs, the first one we will have regarding Masjid Al-Aqsa and the plight of the Palestinians, and we'll talk about that. And the second one will be live from Jerusalem. MashaAllah, Sister Abir will be joining us. She'll be talking about the history of Palestine, the history of Masjid Al-Aqsa. So MashaAllah, we've got some really interesting podcasts coming, taking us all the way to Ramadan, inshallah. So please join us, and inshallah, like, subscribe. This is Baba's job that he doesn't do, so I have to do. Like, subscribe, and inshallah, join us, inshallah, in our podcast, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.